Come write me down, ye powers above, the man that first created love. For I've a diamond in my eye, wherein all my joys and comforts lie. Wherein all my joys and comforts lie.
It's the song, not the singer. We know that the background in which these songs come down to us is that they were sung in small community situations, at home, in the tap room of the pub, in the fields or in the barn when people were working. They were generally sung in quite small groups where people would either all be singing or joining in together, or you might have someone singing a solo, but it would be to quite a small group of people, and they were only a performer for the duration of that song, and then everyone else was equal. So there's a kind of level playing field. Mm-hmm. So what happens then when these songs start to get taken out of that context, which we've done, which you know, the first people we know to do it, the eldest of them was Jim and his brother John in the early 50s, singing at the Festival of Britain. It was in a different context, and I think they didn't want to be the object of the focus of attention. That it wasn't about them. They didn't want it to be a focus on them. So the phrase is, it's the song, not the singer, is saying, look, the message here is the song. That's the thing that's important here. It's not about us. Don't look at us. Don't look at us. We're not really performers. We've bumbled out of the fields onto the stage. And so it's about what we're doing rather than who we are. It's not. So
is it a bit of a defense mechanism from their point of view? Yeah. So was that was created? It's the song, not the singer, by them, or was it?
No idea.
That a well-known saying that has been flattering around?
Yeah, no idea. But it for me, it feels like whoever that came from, it's that same thing. For me, it speaks of a change of context. Whereas before, they weren't performers per se. They were.
Or was it the song that was important? Because we were just talking about that, where the songs were very, very, very close to dying out. So from their point of view, they were saving those songs. So from their point of view, it was really important to revive those songs, to keep them going, because they were gone, weren't they? So from their point of view, yes, it probably was the song, because that was the precious thing that they had to save from drowning. That in fact now we are, because they are, from our point of view, the songs are very healthy and we don't have to save them particularly. Maybe that's where the focus has changed. From our point of view, it's changed.
Good. Yeah, I agree. That makes good sense. That when there's the last few remnants scattered around, that it was important to hang on to them. I think our focus now. So answer the question. It's the song, not the singer. For them, yes, it was about saving those songs. Well, I think maybe two of those things together could both be true. I think, yes, the songs needed saving because they were the last remnants of a way of life that had changed exponentially in the 50 years up to that point. All of the certainties and the things that had been taken for granted in rural life, in our little version of rural life, had carried on for hundreds or 1,000 years or more, were all rapidly coming to an end. And these last few grains of sand that they could hold on to were the songs. So it was about preserving the songs. You couldn't preserve the singers, because you could, but you're not supposed to.
They didn't know at the time. They didn't know that people were going to look back at them as historical sort of figures of cute farm working type, typical sort of English traditional people. They didn't know at the time that people were going to see that and see that as a sort of folk vision that people do now. You know, those old black and white photos of
Chocolate box.
Oh, yeah, exactly. They didn't know that. They didn't know what that was all about. They didn't know particularly what being famous or a celebrity was all about then, did they? There was no. It was just all about communities and communities only, wasn't it?
So I think
you were lucky to meet someone from Brighton, weren't you?
Yeah. Well, I think it does those two things in one sentence, then, doesn't it? It focuses attention on saving the last few remnants, and it also deflects attention away from people who are not used to performing like that, and says, you know, don't focus on us, focus on these. These are the precious things that need saving.
Yes.
So for Jim's generation, born end of the 19th century, for Bob's generation, born early 20th century, those two statements feel right, don't they? It's the song, not the singer.
Yes.
So how do we feel about the statement, it's the song, not the singer now?
Well, I think they're both on par, really, because it becomes as together as a package, doesn't it? So from our point of view, from being inside the tradition or the legacy of our family, the people that I sing with are as important, if not more, than the songs that we're singing. But some of those songs, depends on the songs, but some of the songs remind me of people in our family that are no longer with us, and they have a special. So each individual song, from my point of view, has different, gives me different thoughts and feelings, I suppose. It's very tricky to be able to explain, really.
So for me, I think that the change, which is what we've been looking at in the films that little videos we've been doing, it's about the context now. So that job of capturing the last few grains of sand was largely done, and those grains of sand have been kept in petri dishes, and you know, we've retained them, but without the context in which they existed then, and you know, the continuing context now for us, they lose their meaning. They become museum pieces. They become artifacts.
Yeah,
it was different for those guys then because they were the context. So they didn't have to worry about the context. The context was still extant. Well, that's like for us now. The context is still extant. That's still carrying on. We're still doing that same thing in the same funny parochial little way we do it, in the same way it's always been done. But for me, that context is exploring that context. Exploring that context gives a better sense of why these things might be important, why they might be worth singing. Because I think once you scratch beneath the surface, as we have found, there's more than just the song itself. There's all the extra bits that come along with those last few grains of sand, but almost the real treasure. The songs are wonderful, like the antique teapot can be wonderful, but it's the additional bits that come with it that are important. But at the time, those guys were still living in that context. They were the context for it. It's now there's less and less of that context left. There's even less now than there was then.
So when we do a local gig, for instance, in Rossingdean, that is pretty much the full package, isn't it, of the context, the family, and the songs all together, singing in the same place in the same way, as you know, as a tradition.
So why is that important?
But
so
would that be different if we were in California? Would that be if you had your old nanny's recipe for her Victoria sponge and you ate it in her old front room after she'd passed? And what would the feeling be if you then baked that in California and you offered it around to people that you didn't really know? Would you still have that feeling? Would they get that feeling from you offering around your nan's cake?
I'll give you a specific example on that. So I've got, from my mum's side, I've got my great grandma's recipe for Christmas pudding.
Right.
I'd never cooked it before. The first time I cooked it was when we were living in France, and I was working in a Michelin star restaurant, and it was coming up to Christmas, and they were asking me to cook traditional British things, and I'd never cooked this thing, and it had suet in it, and it had to be steamed for 5 hours and then left for a month and then reheated again. And the joy of doing that for the French was firstly to look at how incredulous they were that this was the English idea of cooking, that basically you put animal fat into things, let it go rotten, and then reheat it.
Heat it up again.
So I remember the context of doing that, and them asking questions about it, and having some sense of, now I know a lot less about my mum's side of it than I do about our Copper family side of stuff.
Yeah.
But that recipe in itself, I served the Christmas pudding up in the mess hall where we're all eating above the restaurant, went downstairs to get some more bits, came back up, and they'd eaten the whole pudding. and we're sitting there discussing how it was obviously a French pudding, really, and that somehow the English had stolen it. But my overriding sense is I did feel a sense of connection. I felt an odd sense of pride and connection.
Exactly. And, you were boasting about. Yeah, exactly.
It did bring back. Now, if I'd have simply got that recipe from a cookbook and cooked it, I'd have got some of that, but not the same sense of it that I got. And the fact that was truly, as I tried to explain in my pidgin French, the proof is in the pudding. I don't think I did a very good job of explaining it, but that's that sense of that added value to it. Now,
if we put that on the quote, so it's the cake and not the baker, or is it the baker and not the cake?
Yeah, well, see, I think the answer is it's both.
Yeah, that's what I'm sort of leaning towards now.
Yes and no, it's both. Yeah. There is a sense that the song is important because it's the thing that's easy to pass around. The song is the recipe. The song is the thing that you can broadcast widely. Yeah. And in order to preserve some memory, I think in preserving the songs, they were preserving the memories of what had gone before, not just the song as like a recipe or an artifact. They were preserving a memory of a time that had gone before, of people that had gone before. It wasn't simply that the song was an incredible thing on its own. And so I think for us, it's important to understand the context, the place, the people, what they were doing, how they came together. That's as important part of the package as the actual song itself.
Which is what was one of our first discussions, wasn't it, when we were making the videos of it, and it's the place and the tradition that sits in that place and where it comes from. That's what we were originally talking about, is can you take traditions elsewhere? Can you take an Irish song and play it in the Antarctic? Or should it be, is a tradition something that stays in the same place forever?
No. Yeah, again, I'll go yes and no. So my feeling to that, without overthinking it, is yes, you can sing that in Antarctica to remind you of what it's like, where the origin of where that comes from. It's giving you a sense of either your personal memory or a collective memory of where that song comes from, and a sense of connection back to that. But without renewing it back at the source every so often, the memory becomes more and more distant, and the artifact becomes in more and more danger of becoming a museum piece.
That's a very good point, isn't it? The way they become more hazy. Even when you and I went to France, we sang, but we missed it. We missed that thing, didn't we? We missed the Harveys But then we looked forward to going back home to sing together in what we think is the right place.
Yeah, very much. I had a
And
really strong sense.
it was nice to do it when we were away because it reminded us of home.
Yeah, yes, that called. I remember that. I remember learning songs together while we lived in France, and that the call to do that was because of although we're having a great time there, it was that sense of separation from the context, from the location, from the family, from the people, from the beer, from everything around that. What it did was it was able to evoke those feelings for us of being back in that place.
Yeah.
And I think that what we are lucky enough to be able to do is to be continually dipping back into the well again and refreshing it, because the context, we can still go back to the original context and keep reviving that sense of it. There's no distance, there's no separation, there's no and that's, I guess that's an odd thing. That's so when we've talked before, I was thinking about, and by no means an expert and expect to get it terribly wrong, but First Nation peoples in North America, it's a real strong sense, from what I gather, for a continuity of their traditional practices, because it gives them a real sense of a renewed, by continuing to do those traditional things, not just reading about them in books, them continuing to do them in that sense reinvigorates and renews their sense of themselves and who they are and their place in the world. Importantly, as you were saying, their place in the world as well. Now, that's increasingly rare when everybody's pinging around all over the place and dislocates everywhere. It's not I think what's important is it's not this is a better way of doing things. It's not what I think each feel. It's just a peculiar way, but it doesn't make it better or worse what we do. But I feel that it's interesting to be able to keep going back to that same well and renewing your thing in the same context, in the same family context, same geographical context. Has got a something about it.
So that was a good point. So because people didn't travel a lot in those days, that is probably why these sort of things sprung up, because you were surrounded by people who were always there, and that went from generation to generation to generation, and no one went anywhere. When now you can, or you used to be able to ping around all over the world, that community, solid community, doesn't happen. But now I wonder, with the coronavirus stopping people traveling the world, and the world will be a different place in the future now, won't it? With potentially you won't be allowed to travel so easily around the globe. Maybe this will sort of reignite little community things, singing or groups or whatever it is. People might be forced to then create stronger communities now.
And is this what this is about ultimately for us? This is about a sense of community and community in a place, and about, definitely for me, it's about continuity. It's about that continuing that thing, that sense of connection going backwards, and how that can enable one to face an uncertain future with confidence that we are standing on the shoulders of giants. When we sing these songs, we are just doing the same thing that countless generations had done before and had loved enough to pass on. That the fact that they loved it enough to pass it on so many times means that it has a huge amount of continued value in there. I don't know what it is. This is the thing that we're finding hard to describe. Some sense of,
well, it's the nugget, it's the jewel, isn't it? The something, the magical bit of it that you can't describe, which is why that the pull of that, the power that has makes people want to keep doing it. And that, when you get to later on in life, you start understanding what that magic is, and you want that magic, you want more of that magical feeling, because it is a magical feeling. I don't think you realise that when you're in your 20s and 30s, because you've got a load of other stuff to think about. But once you're getting towards the sort of last third of your life, that's when you think, well, these are the things that are much richer, aren't they, than any car that you can buy me or anything like that.
And are they rich because they've carried on for so long? Is that the sense of richness that comes on? Is that part of what makes them special?
Yeah, it's a solid richness, isn't it? It's like a great big bar of gold, isn't it? It's you can't really explain that thing. It's very strange. It's more than any money, isn't it? It's so much higher than any other sort of money that you can receive or have.
The true definition of priceless.
Exactly that. Exactly that.